Do you remember those Christmas groceries from the 1980s? The ones that quietly told the world your family was stretching every dollar? These items filled carts in homes where love was abundant, but money was tight. What do those grocery choices say about the families who carried them home? Generic brand cola in 2-liter bottles was the unmistakable sign that your family knew how to stretch a holiday budget, and it sat on dinner tables across the country without apology. The labels were plain, the fonts were blocky, and the fizz never quite matched the famous brands everyone saw in commercials. But it was cold, it was sweet, and it filled glasses just as easily as anything else. Kids learned quickly not to mention the difference, because pointing it out only reminded everyone of what they could not afford. Parents poured it into pitchers or lined up the bottles along the counter as if presentation could erase the discount. Grandparents who remembered harder times never complained, because soda of any kind was a luxury they never had growing up. And somehow, after the first few sips, no one really cared anymore. The bubbles tickled the same, the sugar rush hit the same, and the laughter around the table drowned out any thoughts about labels. What mattered was that everyone had a glass in front of them and a plate full of food. Those bottles became part of the memory, not as something lesser, but as proof that celebration did not require a name brand. Powdered milk for holiday baking was one of those quiet sacrifices that mothers made without ever drawing attention to it, stirring the white dust into water and hoping no one noticed. The cardboard box sat in the pantry like a secret, pulled out only when the recipe demanded milk and the refrigerator held none. Kids sometimes caught a glimpse of the mixing process and wrinkled their noses, but they still devoured the cookies that came out of the oven without complaint. Fresh milk was expensive, and in families where every dollar had a destination, wasting it on baking seemed reckless. Powdered milk stretched further, lasted longer, and never spoiled before you could use it. It showed up in cakes, frostings, puddings, and breads, blending into recipes where its presence was nearly invisible. Mothers learned tricks to mask the slight difference in taste, adding extra vanilla or a touch more sugar. And the truth is, most of the time, no one could tell. The cookies still disappeared, the cakes still earned praise, and the powdered milk box quietly returned to its shelf. It was never glamorous, never something families bragged about, but it kept traditions alive when fresh ingredients felt like luxuries. Canned ham with the key opener was the centerpiece of countless holiday tables in the 1980s, glistening under kitchen lights as if it had earned its place at the head of the spread. The metal key attached to the side was almost ceremonial, twisted slowly until the lid curled away and revealed the pink dome of pressed meat inside. It smelled faintly of salt and something vaguely smoky, and it sliced cleanly into rounds that looked almost elegant when fanned across a platter. Families who could not afford a fresh roast or a honey-glazed spiral found dignity in this tin-encased alternative, dressing it up with pineapple rings, maraschino cherries, and a sticky brown sugar glaze. Children watched the slicing with fascination, unaware that the ham represented careful budgeting and weeks of saving. It fed a crowd without emptying a wallet, and leftovers lasted well into the new year. The canned ham never tried to be something it was not, and families embraced it without shame. It was protein, it was tradition, and it was enough. And when the last slice was gone, the empty tin often found a second life holding buttons, screws, or childhood treasures. Bagged cereal from the bottom shelf was one of those grocery aisle truths that every kid understood but never discussed outside the house. The bags were enormous compared to the name brand boxes sitting at eye level, puffed out with flakes, loops, or puffed rice that promised the same crunch at a fraction of the cost. The characters on the packaging looked slightly off, as if someone had drawn them from memory rather than reference, and the names were close enough to trigger recognition but different enough to avoid lawsuits. Kids knew the difference the moment they saw a classmate unpack a lunchbox with a real brand tucked inside. But at home, that bag fed the family through an entire week of breakfasts and late-night snacks. Parents poured carefully to avoid crushing the flakes, and the plastic rustled loudly in the quiet of early mornings. Some kids learned to love it, finding comfort in the familiar crunch, even if the flavor sat just slightly to the left of expectation. Others said nothing, knowing that asking for the real thing meant admitting something they were not ready to say. The cereal filled the bowls either way. Margarine, instead of real butter, sat in refrigerators across the country, yellow and soft inside its plastic tub, ready to spread on toast or melt into holiday recipes without complaint. The tub itself was practical, reusable, and destined for a second life, holding leftovers or crayons long after the margarine was gone. Families who bought it rarely mentioned the switch, and most kids never questioned why their bread tasted slightly different from what they ate at a friend's house. Butter was expensive, and margarine offered a workaround that almost no one discussed openly. It spread easier straight from the fridge, which mothers appreciated during busy mornings, and it disappeared into mashed potatoes and baked goods without leaving a trace of guilt. Some grandparents refused to touch it, insisting that butter was the only proper choice, but budgets did not always allow for tradition. The margarine sat quietly beside the eggs and milk, never demanding attention, never pretending to be something it was not. And over time, it became just as familiar as anything else in the kitchen. Kids grew up spreading it on biscuits and never thought twice about what they might have been missing. Government cheese in the orange box was one of the most recognizable symbols of stretching through hard times, a dense golden block that arrived through commodity programs and sat heavily in the hands of whoever carried it home. The cheese itself was rich, creamy, and melted into everything with an almost aggressive smoothness that store-bought cheese could never match. Families sliced it for sandwiches, cubed it for snacking, and grated it over casseroles that stretched ground beef into meals for six. There was no pretending about where it came from, and kids often saw the orange box sitting on the counter before it was quickly tucked away. Some families felt embarrassed picking it up, standing in lines at distribution centers while hoping no neighbors drove by. But once the cheese hit the pan, sizzling into grilled sandwiches or bubbling over macaroni, the shame dissolved into something closer to gratitude. It tasted better than it had any right to, and many adults still chase that particular flavor without realizing where the memory began. Government cheese fed families when paychecks fell short, and it did so without apology. Tang powder for Christmas morning drinks turned tap water into something that felt almost festive, even if it never quite matched the brightness of real orange juice. The jar sat on the counter with its bold orange lid, scooped out carefully so the powder did not cloud the air and land on everything nearby. Kids stirred their glasses with enthusiasm, watching the crystals dissolve into something that tasted like citrus mixed with sugar and nostalgia. Fresh juice was expensive, especially around the holidays when everyone wanted it, and Tang offered a compromise that stretched further and lasted longer. Astronauts drank it in space, or at least that is what the commercials claimed, and that fact alone gave it a certain credibility that orange juice could never match. Parents served it in plastic cups during holiday breakfasts, and no one complained because the sweetness made everything feel brighter. The tang on the tongue, the faint chemical aftertaste that some people secretly loved, became part of the season itself. Kids did not realize they were drinking a budget substitute. To them, it was simply what Christmas morning tasted like, and that memory lingered long after the jar was empty. Canned vegetables for holiday side dishes lined the pantry shelves in rows of green, yellow, and pale white, their labels promising convenience and a price that fit the tightest budget. Green beans sat in water that tasted faintly metallic. Corn kernels floated in cloudy brine, and peas rolled out of the can with a softness that fresh produce could never replicate. Families heated them on the stove with a pat of margarine, a shake of salt, and the hope that presentation would carry them through dinner. Nobody mentioned that the neighbors might be serving fresh vegetables or something frozen that still held a crunch. Canned sides were dependable, affordable, and fast, which mattered more during busy holiday seasons than anyone cared to admit. Kids pushed them around their plates, bargaining for dessert and promising to eat every last bite. Parents scooped them into serving bowls that once belonged to grandmothers, treating the contents with the same care as anything homemade. And at the end of the meal, those bowls were often empty, picked clean by people who were simply grateful to have food on the table at all. Bologna by the pound from the deli counter was the unsung hero of holiday lunch duty, sliced thick or thin depending on how far the budget needed to stretch that week. The deli worker behind the glass would ask how much, and the answer often came after a quick mental calculation of how many sandwiches were needed before the next paycheck arrived. Kids ate it cold between slices of soft white bread slathered with yellow mustard, or fried in a cast-iron skillet until the edges curled upward and the surface turned golden brown. The smell of fried bologna drifting through the house became a signature scent of holiday break, as recognizable as pine trees or cinnamon sticks hanging in the kitchen. It was protein, it was affordable, and it filled bellies without complaint. Parents sliced it carefully, making each round last as long as possible, tucking it into school lunches and after-school snacks with quiet efficiency. Nobody advertised that they were eating bologna instead of roast beef or sliced turkey, but nobody hid it either. It was simply part of the rhythm of the season, a reliable friend in the refrigerator that never let anyone go hungry. Potted meat and Vienna sausages in tiny tins found their way into stockings and snack drawers as affordable holiday treats that looked almost whimsical in their compact packaging. The potted meat spread onto crackers like a pâté for people who had never heard the word, salty and dense with a texture that some loved and others tolerated. Vienna sausages slid out of their cans in neat little rows, pale pink and glistening, ready to be eaten straight or tucked into recipes that made do with what was available. Kids saw them as novelty foods, something fun and different from the usual meals, and that perception made the budget stretch easier. Parents appreciated how long the tiny tins lasted in the pantry, never spoiling, always ready when hunger struck without warning. They showed up at picnics, road trips, and late-night snacking sessions, never demanding refrigeration or special treatment. And during the holidays, they became stocking stuffers that actually got eaten instead of tossed aside. The tins were cheap, the contents were filling, and the memories they created lasted far longer than anyone expected. Store-brand saltine crackers came in sleeves so long they barely fit in the cabinet, stacked neatly inside boxes that cost a fraction of the name brands sitting one shelf higher. These crackers showed up beside every bowl of soup, every slice of cheese, and every late-night snack that needed something crisp to carry it. The taste was close enough that most kids never noticed the difference, and parents appreciated how far a single box could stretch through the cold months. They crumbled into chili, floated in tomato soup, and disappeared by the handful during holiday movie nights when the family gathered in front of the television. The packaging was plain, the branding forgettable, but the function was identical to anything fancier. Families learned to stop caring about logos when the crackers tasted the same and the savings added up week after week. Some kids even preferred the store brand, though they never admitted it outside the house. Those long sleeves became a quiet constant in kitchens where budgets mattered more than appearances, proof that simplicity could fill a home just as well as anything dressed up in flashy marketing. Kool-Aid packets for holiday punch lined the grocery aisle in rows of bright colors, each small envelope promising a full pitcher of sweetness for just a few cents. Families bought them by the dozen, mixing cherry with grape or orange with lemon to create signature blends that showed up at every holiday gathering throughout the season. The powder dissolved into tap water with a swirl of a wooden spoon, transforming something ordinary into something that looked almost festive when served in a glass bowl with ice cubes floating gently on top. Kids loved the bright colors and the sugar rush that followed every cup, completely unaware that the punch was standing in for sodas or juices that cost far more. Parents stirred in extra sugar to match the sweetness of store-bought drinks, and no one complained. The powder stained lips, fingers, and sometimes kitchen counters, but it also stained memories with something close to joy. Holiday punch made from Kool-Aid became a tradition in homes where creativity stretched further than cash, and the taste still triggers deep nostalgia for anyone who grew up watching that powder bloom into color. Imitation vanilla extract sat on spice racks in small brown bottles that looked almost identical to the real thing, fooling no one who knew the difference but saving dollars that mattered more than flavor. The liquid inside smelled sweeter, sharper, and somehow less warm than pure vanilla, but it disappeared into cookie dough and cake batter without anyone at the table ever noticing. Mothers who baked through the holidays used it generously, knowing that the cookies would still vanish and the cakes would still earn compliments regardless of what the bottle actually contained. Real vanilla was expensive, a luxury reserved for people who did not have to check prices before dropping something into the cart. Imitation vanilla was the quiet compromise, the ingredient that let holiday traditions continue without breaking the budget. Kids licked spoons coated in batter and never questioned the source of the sweetness. The cookies came out golden, the frosting tasted rich, and the memories formed around kitchen tables where the smell of baking filled every room. Nobody cared whether the vanilla was real as long as the love behind it was unmistakable. Day-old bread from the discount rack was one of those grocery store secrets that families guarded carefully, arriving early to grab the best loaves before anyone else noticed them. The bread sat in a separate section, marked down because it had passed its peak freshness by a single day, even though it tasted perfectly fine for toast, sandwiches, and French toast casseroles. Kids never knew the difference when their lunch sandwiches came wrapped in wax paper, and parents never mentioned the savings that added up loaf after loaf. The crust was slightly firmer, the center still soft enough for peanut butter to spread without tearing, and the price made room for other things the family needed. Some mothers turned it into bread pudding, croutons, or stuffing that stretched holiday meals further than fresh loaves ever could. There was no shame in the discount rack, only practicality dressed up as resourcefulness. Families learned to see value where others saw expiration dates, and those marked-down loaves fed more holiday breakfast than anyone ever counted. The bread did its job without complaint, and so did the people who carried it home. Instant mashed potatoes from a box saved countless holiday dinners when time ran short and real potatoes felt like too much work. The flakes poured out like snowdrift into boiling water, transforming within seconds into something that resembled the creamy side dish everyone expected on the table. Families added extra butter, a splash of milk, and sometimes a spoonful of sour cream to disguise the texture that never quite matched the real thing. Kids scooped them onto plates without suspicion, mixing them with gravy until the origins became impossible to detect. Parents appreciated the speed, the consistency, and the price that allowed them to stretch the grocery budget toward the meat or the dessert. Real mashed potatoes took time that busy households did not always have, especially during the chaos of holiday cooking when every burner was occupied. Instant potatoes filled the gap without judgment, sitting in the pantry until the moment they were needed. They were never the star of the meal, but they showed up reliably, blending into the background of family dinners where presence mattered more than perfection. Hamburger Helper stretched ground beef into full family meals during the holiday season, when budgets tightened and creativity became essential for getting through the month. The boxes lined pantry shelves in flavors like stroganoff, cheeseburger macaroni, and beef taco, each one promising a complete dinner with just 1 pound of meat and a few cups of water. Kids loved the salty, cheesy taste that made even the cheapest ground beef feel like a feast, and parents loved how quickly the meal came together after long days of holiday shopping or wrapping presents late into the night. The noodles cooked right in the skillet alongside the meat, absorbing flavor and filling bellies without requiring separate pots or complicated timing. Leftovers reheated well the next day, stretching a single box into 2 meals when necessary. There was no pretending it was gourmet, but there was no shame in it either. Hamburger Helper fed families when fresh ingredients were out of reach, and it did so with a consistency that became comforting over time. Those boxes represented survival dressed up as convenience, and they earned their place in holiday memories across the country. Jiffy cornbread mix came in small boxes that cost almost nothing and produced golden squares of warm, slightly sweet bread that paired beautifully with nearly everything on the holiday table. The batter took minutes to prepare, stirred together with an egg and a splash of milk before sliding into the oven alongside whatever else was already cooking. Kids fought over the corner pieces where the crust turned crispy and the edges browned just enough to crackle between their teeth. Parents served it with chili, with beans, with ham, and with anything else that needed something warm and filling to complete the plate properly. The box promised simplicity, and it delivered without fail every single time the family needed it. Real cornbread from scratch took more ingredients, more time, and more skill than busy holiday kitchens could always afford to spare. Jiffy bridged the gap without apology, offering a shortcut that tasted close enough to homemade that most people never questioned it. The little blue and white box became a holiday staple in homes where the budget demanded compromises, earning loyalty from families who came to depend on its quiet reliability. Off-brand chips in oversized bags appeared at every holiday gathering where feeding a crowd mattered more than impressing anyone with fancy logos or recognizable packaging. The bags were enormous, puffed with air and filled with rippled or plain potato chips that tasted almost identical to the famous brands, but cost half as much at the register. Parents poured them into serving bowls without the original packaging visible anywhere nearby, and guests reached for handfuls without ever asking where they came from or noticing any difference. The crunch was right, the salt was right, and the satisfaction was exactly what people expected from chips at a party. Kids grabbed fistfuls during holiday movie marathons, leaving greasy fingerprints on remote controls and couch cushions without a care in the world. The bags lasted longer than name brands because there was simply more product inside, and leftovers stayed fresh enough in the pantry for days afterward. Nobody bragged about buying off-brand chips, but nobody apologized for them either. They did exactly what they were supposed to do, filling bowls and filling bellies while leaving money in the budget for things that mattered more to the family. Canned fruit cocktail appeared at holiday desserts as the affordable finale that nobody questioned and everyone quietly enjoyed without complaint. The chunky mix of peaches, pears, grapes, and those mysterious bright red cherries floated in thick syrup that tasted sweeter than any fresh fruit could ever manage. Mothers spooned it into bowls, sometimes topped with a dollop of whipped cream from a pressurized can or a scoop of vanilla ice cream that slowly melted into the syrup below. Kids loved the treasure hunt aspect of finding their favorite fruit pieces, pushing aside the pears to reach the cherries or saving the grapes for last. Fresh fruit was expensive and spoiled quickly, especially during winter months when options at the grocery store were severely limited. Canned fruit cocktails solved both problems, sitting on pantry shelves indefinitely until someone decided it was time for dessert. It showed up in Jell-O molds, layered parfaits, and simple bowls passed around the table after the main meal ended. The fruit was soft, the syrup was sweet, and the memories of scraping the last pieces from the bowl still linger warmly for anyone who grew up with this humble dessert. Store-brand ice cream in the rectangular cardboard tub sat in freezers as the affordable treat that made holiday desserts possible without emptying the grocery budget. The tub was plain, printed with simple stripes or generic designs that made no attempt to compete with the fancy containers nearby. Inside, the ice cream was slightly icier than premium brands, slightly less creamy, but still cold and sweet, and exactly what everyone wanted after a big meal. Parents scooped it over warm pie, alongside cake, or straight into bowls for kids who had earned something sweet for finishing their vegetables. The flavors were basic, usually vanilla, chocolate, or strawberry, but they paired with everything and complained about nothing. The cardboard tub often found a second life in the freezer, refilled with homemade soup or used to store leftovers until someone remembered to throw it away. Nobody mistook it for gourmet, but nobody expected gourmet either. The ice cream did its job quietly and consistently, melting into memories that had nothing to do with brand names and everything to do with family gathered around the table. Ramen noodles by the case-filled pantry shelves as the ultimate backup meal that never let a family down during the lean weeks of winter. The small square packages cost almost nothing, and each one promised a hot bowl of salty broth and soft noodles in less time than it took to set the table. Kids ate them after school, parents ate them for quick lunches, and sometimes the whole family gathered around bowls of steaming ramen when the grocery budget had stretched as far as it could go. The flavor packets dissolved into boiling water with a swirl that turned plain noodles into something that felt like a real meal. Some families added eggs, vegetables, or slices of leftover meat to stretch the nutrition further without spending another dime. The packaging was simple, the ingredients were basic, and the satisfaction was immediate. Ramen became a symbol of making do, of creativity born from necessity. and of meals that filled bellies even when the refrigerator held almost nothing else. Those small packages carried families through hard weeks without complaint, proving that survival could taste surprisingly good. Frozen juice concentrate in the small cardboard cans sat in freezers waiting to be mixed into pitchers of something that almost tasted like fresh squeezed. The frozen cylinder slid out with a satisfying thunk, landing in the pitcher before tap water dissolved it into something sweet and bright. Kids stirred enthusiastically, watching the orange or grape or lemonade color spread through the water like magic happening in their own kitchen. Fresh juice was expensive and spoiled quickly, but concentrate lasted for months in the freezer and stretched into multiple servings that cost a fraction of the real thing. Parents served it at breakfast, packed it in thermoses for school lunches, and poured it at holiday gatherings where nobody questioned what they were drinking. The taste was sweeter than fresh, more consistent, and perfectly acceptable to kids who had never known the difference anyway. Those little cans became a staple of morning routines in homes where every dollar mattered. The juice did its job without pretense, filling glasses and filling the gap between what families wanted and what they could actually afford. White bread from the economy loaf sat soft and squishy in its plastic sleeve, ready to become sandwiches, toast, or the foundation of whatever meal needed stretching that day. The slices were thinner than premium brands, the texture slightly more air than substance, but they held peanut butter, Bologna, and sliced cheese just fine. Kids never complained because white bread was simply what bread looked like in their world, and the softness made it easy to eat without fighting through crusts or dense whole grains. Parents bought the largest loaves they could find, knowing that a single bag needed to last through an entire week of lunches, breakfasts, and after-school snacks for the whole family. The bread went stale faster than fancier options, but it rarely had the chance to sit that long before every slice was gone. Some families toasted every slice to mask the slight staleness that crept in toward the end of the week. Others made French toast, bread pudding, or croutons when the loaf started to turn. Nothing was wasted because nothing could afford to be wasted, and that economy loaf understood its assignment perfectly. Canned tuna packed in water became the protein of choice when fresh meat felt like an impossible luxury during the holiday season. The small cans stacked easily in the pantry, waiting to be drained, flaked, and mixed into casseroles, sandwiches, or cold salads that stretched a single can into multiple servings for the family. Kids ate tuna melts on toast, tuna noodle casserole with crushed potato chips on top, and cold tuna salad scooped onto saltine crackers when something quick was needed between holiday chaos. The smell was unmistakable, filling the kitchen the moment the can opener bit into the metal lid. But families learned to love it because it meant dinner was coming together fast. Parents appreciated how affordable it was compared to chicken or beef, and how the protein content made it a respectable centerpiece for budget meals. Mixed with mayonnaise, celery, and a little salt, it transformed into something almost elegant when served on a bed of lettuce or tucked between slices of soft bread. Canned tuna fed families without apology, proving that humble ingredients could still create meals worth remembering fondly. Dry beans in the plastic bag represented patience, planning, and the willingness to cook from scratch when convenience foods still cost more than the time required to make them. The bags sat in the pantry for weeks before someone finally soaked them overnight, simmered them for hours, and transformed them into soups, stews, or hearty side dishes that fed the whole family for days. Kids watched the hard little pellets soften and swell, amazed that something so plain could become something so warm and filling. Parents added ham hocks, onions, or whatever seasonings they had on hand, turning a bag that cost almost nothing into a pot that could stretch across multiple dinners. The beans required effort, but they rewarded that effort with warmth, nutrition, and the kind of deep satisfaction that only slow-cooked food could provide. Some families served them over rice, others alongside fresh cornbread, and many simply ladled them into bowls with nothing but salt and pepper to finish the meal. Dry beans taught children that good food did not always come from cans or boxes, and that sometimes the best meals were the ones that took all day to make. Marshmallows for sweet potato casserole were a holiday indulgence that felt extravagant, even if they came from the cheapest bag in the store. Housewives scattered them over canned yams, popped the dish into the oven, and waited for the sugar to melt into golden clouds. It was dessert disguised as a side dish, a sneaky little treat that made even the simplest dinner feel special. The scent of toasted marshmallows mixed with cinnamon filled the air and made Christmas dinner feel like magic. Watching the marshmallows puff and brown under the heat was a kind of ritual, simple, slow, and full of anticipation. Children hovered by the oven door, waiting for that perfect, gooey crust to appear. It was sweet chaos on a spoon, the kind of dish that made you forget rationing, bills, and worry for a moment. Every bite was sugar and warmth, a promise that love still lived in that kitchen. Children loved it, adults pretended not to, and everyone took seconds anyway. It was the kind of sugary comfort that turned hardship into joy, even if just for a few bites. Every spoonful was sticky, sweet, and full of warmth, the flavor of thrift wrapped in celebration. Blue Pepsi in the 1980s was an experiment that looked like the future, until the future banned it. It was Pepsi's first foray into color innovation, a glowing cobalt drink that turned heads on store shelves. The blue hue was mesmerizing, electric, and unapologetically artificial, giving the soda an almost science fiction vibe. But the secret behind that brilliant color was less exciting. Chemical dyes, later deemed unsafe for human consumption. The dyes used, like Blue Number, 1 and a few experimental additives, were linked to toxicity concerns after being tested in animals. Some reports even hinted at allergic reactions in sensitive drinkers. For a while, Pepsi brushed it off, calling it color evolution. The FDA called it something else, a violation. Stores pulled it from shelves quietly, and Pepsi moved on to safer formulations. Still, for anyone who tasted it, Blue Pepsi was unforgettable. Syrupy, neon, and strangely metallic, like drinking an electric wire. It was the 1980s bottled, loud, bold, and completely unbothered by health warnings until it was too late. The idea would later resurface decades later in the 1990s with Pepsi Blue, but that version was a sanitized echo of the original. The first Blue Pepsi remains a bright, toxic symbol of a decade that never met a bad idea it couldn't package and sell. Yes, this was real. In the 1950s, novelty stores sold dog smoking kits, designed to teach pets to hold cigarettes in their mouths while exhaling smoke. Advertisements promised endless laughter and party entertainment, complete with instructions and a small clamp to fit over a dog's snout. Crowds gathered at picnics or block parties to watch Fido puff away like a tired office worker. The dogs, of course, had no idea what was happening. The kits didn't hurt them directly, but secondhand smoke and sheer indignity probably didn't help. Even by mid-century standards, it was surreal, a nation so charmed by smoke that it tried to share it with its pets. These were the years when fun often meant forgetting the line between novelty and nonsense. It was the decade's most surreal expression of human boredom, proof that if people could make something smoke, they would. The craze faded as quickly as it began, but the photos still haunt history books. Smiling families, tail-wagging pets, and a cloud of absurdity no one seemed to notice. In the 1950s, even man's best friend couldn't escape humanity's worst ideas. Before squeeze bottles and plastic convenience, Hershey's syrup came in a heavy metal can that required skill, patience, and a spoon. You had to puncture both sides of the lid with a can opener to pour the thick, chocolatey magic inside. And somehow, that ritual made it taste even better. Kids waited in giddy anticipation as the syrup slowly flowed into their milk or dripped over melting ice cream. Every drop felt earned, every swirl a victory of flavor and timing. The sound of the can opener clicking was as much a part of dessert as the taste itself. Hershey's syrup turned ordinary moments into celebrations, whether stirred into a glass after school or drizzled over a scoop of vanilla on Sunday night. It was a flavor so familiar that it became part of childhood itself, a sweet punctuation mark at the end of the day. In a decade built on newness and invention, Hershey's syrup stayed charmingly old-fashioned, reminding everyone that some pleasures should remain deliciously slow. Only in the 1950s could someone look at a car ashtray and think, you know what this needs? A steak. Car ashtrays that doubled as mini grills were the ultimate gadget for the man on the go, or the man who just couldn't wait for dinner. Designed to plug into the car's cigarette lighter, these chrome curiosities promise to cook your meal while you cruise. Picture it. Dad behind the wheel, one hand on the steering column, the other turning a sizzling burger on the dashboard. The smell of gasoline, tobacco, and half-cooked beef filled the cabin like some dystopian roadside diner. It was marketed as the perfect road trip companion, ideal for busy executives and outdoorsmen on the move. Safety warnings were non-existent, because of course they were. One wrong turn and you weren't just flipping your lunch, you were flipping your car. Still, it captured everything Americans loved about the decade: convenience, confidence, and a reckless belief that anything could be improved with a little electricity. The ads boasted, "No smoke, no mess," which was a blatant lie. The only thing they didn't lie about was that you'd never go hungry again, just possibly unconscious from the fumes. By the end of the decade, fire departments everywhere had seen enough dashboard barbecue disasters to quietly retire the invention. But for a brief, glorious moment, the open road smelled like progress, bad decisions, and burnt hot dogs. Tartar control potato chips sounded like a joke, and honestly, it probably should have stayed one. In an era obsessed with innovation, some marketing genius decided that vinegar-flavored chips should taste more cleansing. So they launched Tartar control chips, seasoned with acidic compounds meant to mimic the tang of tartar sauce. They hit the shelves in select stores in the mid-1980s and were gone almost immediately. Customers hated them. The flavor was a sour, greasy mess that coated your mouth in salt and regret. Health experts didn't love them either, since the acidic oils were harsh on enamel and stomach lining. Even the name was off-putting. No one wants dental hygiene in their snack aisle. By the time complaints reached the FDA, the brand had already started pulling inventory. Some blamed a bad batch, others blamed bad judgment. But either way, the clean chip experiment ended in disgrace. Years later, collectors still talk about the packaging: a smiling tooth holding a bag of chips, blissfully unaware of its fate. Tartar control chips became the ultimate punchline in the 1980s snack lore, proof that not every new idea deserves to make it past the brainstorming stage. Spam was the uninvited guest that always found a way to stay for dinner, and at Christmas, it wore its Sunday best. Families fried it, baked it, diced it, or dressed it with cloves and brown sugar like it was a proper roast. You could slice it into sandwiches or stretch it into casseroles, and no one complained because it filled you up. Its pink, rubbery charm became an odd symbol of comfort and survival. It sizzled loud in the pan, the smell of salt and fat turning hunger into hope. Housewives sliced it in neat squares, brushed it with glaze, and served it proudly, because feeding your family was what mattered most. The texture might have been strange, but the pride in serving it was real. Spam wasn't just food. It was a symbol of resourcefulness and love in hard times. For those living paycheck to paycheck, Spam was not an embarrassment. It was reliability in a tin. Every kitchen cupboard had at least one can tucked away just in case. It was salty, hearty, and familiar, the kind of taste that did not pretend to be anything else. In a way, it reminded people that Christmas was not about extravagance. It was about making something humble feel like home. The artificial whipped cream in pressurized glass cans was a disaster waiting to happen. And in the 1980s, it finally did. Long before aluminum cans became standard, some whipped cream brands packaged their product in sleek, clear glass bottles to show off the rich texture inside. They looked beautiful in commercials, frosty, elegant, and perfectly premium. But behind that gloss was a bomb. The pressurized nitrous oxide used to propel the cream reacted unpredictably with the glass, especially when stored in cold grocery freezers. Several cans shattered or outright exploded, sending shards and whipped cream flying. Supermarkets reported injuries, lawsuits followed, and regulators stepped in immediately. The product was recalled nationwide within months, replaced by safer aluminum designs. Some brands tried to blame improper storage, but consumers weren't buying it. literally or figuratively. The incident reshaped how aerosol products were tested and handled in the food industry. For a while, though, it was pure chaos. Aisles covered in cream, warning signs posted in freezer sections, and one more lesson learned about how form should never beat function. The glass cans disappeared forever, but their story lives on as one of the strangest explosions in grocery history. Before we knew better, and sometimes even after, we made sure cigarettes were everywhere. The 1950s took that mission seriously, rolling out vending machines that sold cigarettes in a can. You'd pop in a coin, twist a knob, and out came a tidy aluminum can filled with smokes. It was modern, sanitary, and portable, the cigarette industry's idea of innovation. Ads called it the future of freshness, as if tobacco was suddenly a health food. The design mimicked canned soda, another booming industry, turning nicotine into a stylish accessory for every pocket. Schools had them, hospitals had them. Even train stations had glowing vending machines urging people to enjoy life, smoke modern. Nurses on break smoked beside patients. Students traded cans like baseball cards. The message was clear. Smoking wasn't just normal. It was patriotic, scientific, and sophisticated. Cigarettes in a can perfectly captured the 1950s illusion of progress when even addiction could be sold as convenience. By the 1960s, health warnings dimmed the glow and the vending cans vanished. But for a brief decade, they were the metallic symbol of an age that thought every problem could be solved with packaging. And if the problem was, how do I smoke more efficiently? Well, the 1950s already had the answer sealed and ready to ship. Blue Bonnet margarine marked the beginning of a quiet revolution at the breakfast table. Butter had always been the gold standard, but post-war practicality changed everything. Housewives were managing budgets, waistlines, and new appliances, and margarine fit right in. Sold in tidy, foil-wrapped sticks, it was cheaper, lasted longer, and spread more easily on warm toast. Its bright blue packaging promised modern living with a cheerful confidence. Everything's better with Blue Bonnet on it. For many women, it was not just a product. It was a symbol of control, convenience, and choice in a rapidly changing world. Unlike butter, margarine could sit on the counter without guilt or waste. It became the silent hero of countless sandwiches and pie crusts, blending seamlessly into recipes while freeing homemakers from old-fashioned limitations. The taste might have been a little different, but the freedom it represented was worth more than flavor. It embodied the optimism of the decade, when technology and thrift could work hand in hand. Blue Bonnet margarine made it possible to live well without spending more, and in a time when women were redefining what homemade meant, that felt like progress. Boxed macaroni and cheese was the comfort blanket of the 1970s kitchen, especially at Christmas when fresh cheese was out of reach. That bright orange powder was a small miracle in itself, cheap, easy, and instantly satisfying. Parents loved it because it fed a crowd. Kids loved it because it tasted like happiness. Sometimes housewives would mix in canned peas or a few slices of leftover hot dogs to make it stretch even further. It was never fancy, but the smell alone could make a small apartment feel rich. The bright color and creamy texture made children feel like they were eating something special, even when it came from a box. For many families, that little saucepan on the stove meant one night of peace, one meal without worry. On holidays, it often stood in for more expensive sides, and no one ever complained. Housewives added milk or butter when they could, stretching it with love and improvisation. It was soft, creamy, and perfectly filling, the kind of food that made you forget what you did not have. It was proof that joy did not have to be expensive. Sometimes it came in a blue box with a promise of comfort. MSG-laden soup mixes were the backbone of 1980s casseroles, stews, and potluck dinners. Every home cook had a few packets stashed away, ready to transform boring chicken into culinary magic. "Just add water," the boxes said, and families did, by the millions. The flavor was bold, addictive, and unmistakably artificial. Then came the MSG scare, a flood of reports blaming monosodium glutamate for headaches, fatigue, and Chinese restaurant syndrome. Overnight, something that once meant flavor now meant fear. MSG became public enemy number one thanks to sensational headlines and questionable studies. Suddenly, housewives who'd spent years cooking with it were tossing it in the trash. Even companies that knew the science was shaky jumped ship to avoid backlash. Manufacturers scrambled to hide it under new names like hydrolyzed protein. Supermarkets purged shelves and recipe books quietly rewrote themselves. The craze for all-natural cooking that followed changed the way America seasoned its food forever. By the 1990s, MSG's reputation was unfairly destroyed, though science later found little evidence of harm. Still, those old packets disappeared for good, taking with them a flavor so intense it almost made you forget what real food tasted like. For office workers of the 1950s, sitting still was officially out. The Pogo balancing desk chair promised a dynamic workday, combining ergonomic science with circus-level danger. The seat sat atop a heavy metal spring, forcing the user to balance constantly while typing, filing, or contemplating their life choices. The theory was that micro-movements would strengthen your core and improve posture. In practice, most people simply fell off. The slightest sneeze sent you wobbling like a carnival act. Yet the ads showed elegant workers perched gracefully, grinning as if their spine had finally achieved enlightenment. It was an invention that confused exercise with punishment, productivity with peril. Every meeting looked like a gym class gone slightly wrong. The chair clanged, creaked, and occasionally launched its owner backward like a rejected rocket test. It was office fitness by way of slapstick, the perfect symbol of a decade that thought inconvenience meant innovation. Managers swore it boosted productivity. Employees swore back. By the time swivel chairs returned, the bruised knees of secretaries everywhere had already written the obituary for the Pogo chair. Bisquick baking mix was the kitchen shortcut every homemaker dreamed of. It came in a cheerful yellow box that promised fresh biscuits, pancakes, waffles, and dumplings, all in minutes. What once took time, skill, and a little luck could now be done with a single scoop and a splash of milk. In an age obsessed with efficiency and modern living, Bisquick was nothing short of a culinary revolution. It made breakfast spontaneous again, the kind of meal you could whip up before the coffee finished brewing. Every mom swore by it, and every kid learned to recognize the smell of Bisquick pancakes as a sign that morning had truly begun. The appeal was simple. It worked every time. No mess, no guessing, no failed dough. It turned the everyday cook into a reliable baker, something generations before could only dream of. Ads boasted that you could make anything from Bisquick, and they were not far off. From strawberry shortcake to pot pies, the mix became a silent partner in millions of kitchens. It was fast, flexible, and perfectly in tune with the rhythm of the modern family. Bisquick wasn't just flour and leavening. It was a box full of confidence for the 1950s homemaker, proof that convenience and care could live side by side on the dinner table. Of all the 1950s food inventions, canned bread might be the strangest, and somehow the most practical. It came in shiny tins that promised freshness preserved for years. The dough was baked directly inside the can, resulting in a dense brown loaf that slid out like a sponge. It was oddly satisfying to open, and surprisingly edible with enough butter or jam. Advertisers pitched it as the future of convenience, perfect for camping, lunchboxes, and the inevitable nuclear apocalypse. Families loved it because it felt both comforting and futuristic, a loaf built to survive anything, even the end of the world. It was proof that America's appetite for innovation extended all the way to its pantry shelves. Housewives stocked it next to canned peaches and Spam, proud of their preparedness. It was comfort food with a metal edge, part bakery, part bunker ration. The taste? Sweet, slightly metallic, and unforgettably weird. Canned bread captured the contradictions of the era perfectly, optimistic, paranoid, and determined to can everything, even tradition. It's still made in small corners of New England today, but as a curiosity, not a comfort. Back then, though, it was survival you could slice. Orbitz drink looked like a science experiment, and honestly, it kind of was. The glass bottles were filled with colorful liquid and tiny gelatin beads that floated mid-air like some kind of edible lava lamp. It was marketed as a drink from the future, combining 1990s aesthetics with 1980s optimism. The problem was, no one knew what it actually was, or if it was safe. The suspended beads were made from gellan gum, an unapproved additive at the time. Regulators later found the formula didn't meet food safety standards, citing issues with consistency, stability, and digestion. Consumers were equally confused, half fascinated, half disgusted. The drink's texture was bizarre, thick yet watery, with chewy bits that made every sip a dare. People bought it once for the novelty, took a sip, and left the rest on the shelf. Within a year, the futuristic beverage was banned from most markets and quietly discontinued. Today, surviving bottles sell for hundreds of dollars online, still sealed, not because anyone wants to drink them, but because they look like relics from an alternate reality where taste didn't matter. Orbitz was what happens when marketing dreams too big and science says absolutely not. Instant gravy mix was the quiet miracle worker that pulled every cheap Christmas dinner together. Whether it came from a packet or a jar, it could make instant potatoes taste rich and canned meat feel freshly roasted. Housewives whisked it in boiling water, watching it thicken into glossy brown perfection in minutes. It was the smell of holidays, even when there was no turkey in the oven. The first whiff rising from the saucepan made every mouth water. It didn't matter that it came from powder. It had the soul of a real meal. The deep, salty flavor filled the gaps left by missing roasts and homemade drippings. Instant gravy made every plate look like a triumph, even if it was just survival dressed in flavor. The savory aroma covered every shortage, every substitute, every reminder of what the meal might have been. It was the kind of kitchen magic that gave dignity to dinner plates that might have looked plain without it. Instant gravy made the meal whole, binding every side, every scrap, into something you could be proud to serve. If elegance could kill, 1950s cosmetics nearly succeeded. The decade's compacts and powders often contained lead, giving them a smooth finish and that pearly sheen women adored. Ads promised youthful radiance and long-lasting coverage, conveniently skipping the part about chronic poisoning. Women carried them everywhere, tiny, glamorous mirrors of a toxic truth. Beauty in the 1950s wasn't just about looking flawless. It was about keeping up with the illusion that modern science made everything safe. Each compact held a quiet contradiction. Glamour on the surface, danger underneath. The glow was real, but so was the risk. Repeated use led to fatigue, anemia, and worse, though few connected the dots. Beauty was supposed to require sacrifice, and in the 1950s, that saying was literal. It was the golden age of surface perfection, where danger hid beneath the shimmer. Eventually, safety laws caught up, but for a generation of women, the price of beauty had already been paid, one powder puff at a time. Mrs. Paul's frozen fish fillets were the ocean's answer to suburban convenience. Before the 1950s, seafood was a luxury, something only coastal towns could truly enjoy fresh. But Mrs. Paul's brought it to the heartland, neatly breaded, frozen, and ready for the oven. Housewives could serve up seafood dinners without any smell, scales, or guesswork. It was elegance for the everyday, a golden brown promise that even a Tuesday could taste like a Friday night by the shore. The crisp coating and mild flavor turned cautious eaters into seafood fans, one bite at a time. The brand's success helped define the frozen food boom, giving Americans access to new tastes with old-fashioned simplicity. For many families, Mrs. Paul's wasn't just dinner, it was discovery. It transformed the freezer aisle into a world map of flavors, one box at a time. With every sizzling pan and crispy edge, Mrs. Paul's made the impossible possible, ocean-fresh flavor in the middle of the Midwest. Canned meat, spreads with nitrates, were the lunchtime staple nobody questioned, until they did. Sold as savory protein spreads, these canned concoctions were made for crackers, sandwiches, and cold buffets. The flavor was meaty, salty, and vaguely metallic, and for decades, it was considered perfectly normal. But the secret ingredient keeping it fresh wasn't so innocent. Tests in the late 1980s revealed nitrate and nitrite levels far above the FDA's safe limits, preservatives that, when heated or stored improperly, could form carcinogenic compounds. The cans also contained sodium so high it could qualify as a cure-all for bland food and bad decisions. Health experts sounded the alarm, and grocery stores scrambled to pull the worst offenders. The ban came quietly, replaced by reformulated versions with reduced nitrates and shorter shelf lives. For people who grew up spreading it on crackers at family picnics, the news felt like betrayal. One more comfort food turned cautionary tale. Today, nitrate-free deli meats are everywhere, but those old cans remain a haunting reminder of how the 1980s traded safety for shelf stability. It was the era of forever food until regulators decided forever was far too long. Canned green beans were a fixture on every poor family's Christmas table, soft, salty, and somehow satisfying. They lacked the crispness of fresh vegetables, but they were dependable and cheap, which mattered far more. Most homes turned them into the classic green bean casserole, mixing them with canned soup and fried onions. It was a dish that looked fancy enough for company but cost next to nothing. The pop of the can was like a starting bell for holiday cooking, signaling another meal pulled together with love. Housewives stirred the beans carefully into cream of mushroom soup, making magic out of pantry staples. The smell that drifted from the oven was rich and savory, disguising the fact that every ingredient came from a tin. No one cared. It was comfort on a budget, and every bite tasted like home. The smell of it baking filled small kitchens with a holiday coziness that belied its humble ingredients. Even those who grew tired of eating canned food the rest of the year found comfort in that familiar taste. They were a symbol of making do, of turning the simplest groceries into something worth celebrating. And for one night a year, that was enough. Nothing said modern family life like balancing a Salisbury steak on your lap while puffing on a cigarette. The TV dinner tray table was already a household essential, but someone decided it could be improved with built-in ashtrays. Now, diners could eat and smoke simultaneously. No interruptions required. Advertisements showed smiling families with glowing screens, glowing cigarettes, and plates of glowing orange macaroni. Dinner had become a performance, an act of leisure and luxury that made multitasking look glamorous. It was the 1950s answer to efficiency. One hand for the fork, the other for the filter tip. The trays were collapsible, chrome-trimmed, and completely oblivious to the concept of fire safety. Kids mimicked their parents by pretending to flick ashes from imaginary smokes. It was the peak of atomic age leisure, television, convenience food, and nicotine, all in one metallic masterpiece. By the time health warnings arrived, the combination of grease, sparks, and ashtray features had already written its own cautionary tale. But for a few golden years, this setup was the image of post-war success, a country eating itself silly and smoking the evidence. Baker's coconut flakes added a touch of magic to nearly every 1950s dessert. Soft, snowy, and impossibly sweet, it was the garnish that crowned cakes, cookies, and pies from coast to coast. Homemakers sprinkled it generously, turning simple treats into something that looked and smelled like celebration. Coconut wasn't just an ingredient. It was a symbol of indulgence and adventure, a taste of the tropics without leaving home. Every bite of a coconut-covered cake carried the promise of warmth and wonder, even in the coldest kitchen. Bakers made every homemaker feel like a confectionery artist, capable of creating something exotic right from a box. Ads proudly featured golden cakes piled high with white frosting and flakes that sparkled like snow under kitchen lights. It was an aesthetic of joy and abundance, a sign that post-war prosperity had finally reached the dessert plate. Whether it was Easter, Christmas, or just a Wednesday, Baker's coconut flakes made every occasion feel like a holiday. It was sweetness elevated to an art form, and one spoonful could turn the ordinary into the unforgettable. Rely tampons by Procter & Gamble were a triumph of marketing and a tragedy of science. Sold in grocery aisles and advertised as revolutionary, They promised unmatched absorbency through their unique super sponge design. For a while, they were hailed as a breakthrough in women's health. But in 1980, the dream turned deadly. The synthetic fibers used in Rely tampons were linked to toxic shock syndrome, a bacterial infection that proved fatal for dozens of women. The product's sponge-like material, designed to trap more moisture, also created the perfect environment for bacteria to grow. Doctors quickly raised alarms, but Procter & Gamble's marketing machine was faster than the science. It took a national outcry and mounting deaths for the truth to finally hit the shelves. The recall was swift, the outrage faster, and the damage permanent. Rely disappeared from stores almost overnight, but the incident changed the entire industry. New safety standards, labeling laws, and medical research came directly from the disaster. It was a haunting reminder that even innovation can go horribly wrong when profit outpaces precaution. For a generation of shoppers, Rely wasn't just a brand. It was a warning stamped in fine print. If any of these budget groceries brought back memories of stretching every dollar, share your story in the comments, tap like if this list hit close to home, and subscribe so you never miss another trip down memory lane.